R&B music is full of soulful voices that feel timeless, but the artists behind them were often living on borrowed time. We're looking at 20 R&B stars whose lights went out way too soon. The story behind the #1 artist on our list involves a mysterious plane crash, a shady pilot, and a flight that should have never, ever taken off. 1. Aaliyah. Everyone remembers Aaliyah. She was the princess of R&B and was taking over the world in the late 90s and early 2000s. She had hit songs, she was starring in movies like Romeo Must Die, and she was set to be a massive star. In 2001, at just 22 years old, she was in the Bahamas filming a music video for her song Rock the Boat. It was a beautiful, sunny day. When filming wrapped, she and her team were eager to get back to the U.S. They boarded a small, twin-engine plane. But here's the part that's truly heartbreaking. The plane was dangerously overloaded. It was weighed down with heavy camera equipment, luggage, and one too many passengers. The thing nobody tells you is that the pilot wasn't even certified to fly that type of plane. He had also falsified his flight logs. The plane barely got off the ground before it crashed, just 200 feet from the runway. All 9 people on board, including Aaliyah, were lost. She was an icon on the verge of becoming a legend. Aaliyah's passing in a plane crash was a shocking accident, but our next star's passing was just as sudden, and it happened on a remote road thousands of miles away. 2. Lisa "Left Eye" Lopes. You can't talk about 90s R&B without talking about TLC. They were the biggest selling American girl group of all time. You had T-Boz, the cool voice, Chili, the sweet one, and then you had Lisa "Left Eye" Lopes. She was the fire, the creative genius, and the rapper who brought all the energy. Lisa was known for being wild and unpredictable, but many people don't know she was also a very spiritual person. In 2002, she traveled to Honduras for a 30-day spiritual retreat. She was trying to cleanse her life and work on a documentary. She was driving an SUV on a winding rural road. What many overlooked is that she was the one behind the wheel. She swerved to avoid a truck, then swerved again to avoid another car. The vehicle rolled over several times. Here's the truly eerie part. Lisa was the only person in the car who wasn't wearing a seatbelt. She was the only one who didn't survive. She was just 30 years old. Even stranger, just a week before, a camera she was using to film her documentary captured a moment where a van she was in accidentally struck and fatally injured a young Honduran boy. It was a tragic trip from start to finish. Lisa's end was a tragic accident in a foreign country. But our next star's battle was much more public, and it took her life right in her own home. 3. Amy Winehouse. When Amy Winehouse came on the scene, nobody had heard anything like her. She had this incredible, soulful voice that sounded like it came from a 1960s jazz club. But her lyrics were modern and raw. She won 5 Grammy Awards for her album Back to Black, and she was a global superstar. But as famous as she was for her music, she was also famous for her struggles. She was constantly followed by photographers, and her battles with personal demons and addiction were all over the news. She tried to get clean several times, but the pressure of the spotlight seemed to make things worse. The thing is, many people thought she was getting better just before her passing. In July 2011, she was found in her London home. The official cause was alcohol poisoning. To put it mildly, the amount of alcohol in her system was more than 5 times the legal driving limit. The truly sad wow factor is that she became a member of the 27 Club, a group of famous musicians like Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, who all passed away at the age of 27. Amy's passing at 27 was a tragedy. But another music legend, who also passed away at just 26, met his end in a different kind of crash, one that silenced the king of soul. 4. Otis Redding. If you've ever heard the song "Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay," you know the voice of Otis Redding. He was a force of nature. In the mid-1960s, he was the face of soul music. His performance at the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967 was legendary, and it introduced him to a whole new, massive audience. He was only 26 years old, but he was already a huge star and a family man with 3 kids. In December 1967, he was traveling with his band to a show in Wisconsin. They were flying in his own private plane, a Beechcraft H-18. The weather was terrible, with heavy rain and fog. Here's the part that gets lost to history. The plane crashed into the icy waters of Lake Monona. The rescue was almost immediate, but the cold was too much. Otis, his pilot, and 4 members of his band were lost. The only survivor was band member Ben Cauley. But here's the real kicker. His most famous song, Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay, was recorded just 3 days before the crash. He never even got to see it become a #1 hit. Otis's sudden passing in a crash was a blow to the music world. But another 1960s soul legend's passing wasn't an accident at all, but a shocking and violent event at a motel at
Number 5.
Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke was more than just a singer. He was an icon. He started as a gospel star and then crossed over to pop and R&B, scoring huge hits like You Send Me and A Change Is Gonna Come. He was handsome, had a voice as smooth as silk, and was one of the first black artists to own his own record label. In December 1964, Cooke was 33 years old and on top of the world. He checked into a motel in Los Angeles late at night with a woman. But just a short time later, the motel manager heard a disturbance. The official story is one of the most debated in music history. The motel manager claimed Cooke attacked her, and she had to use a firearm in self-defense. He was found having passed away from a gunshot wound. But not. All things are what they seem. Many people close to Cooke believe this story doesn't add up. They believe it was a setup, possibly related to his business dealings and his powerful stance on civil rights. To this day, the true story of what happened in that motel room remains a dark mystery. Sam Cooke's passing is still shrouded in mystery and violence, but our next star's end was just as tragic, and it involved a 15-story fall from a New York hotel. 6. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway's voice was pure, unfiltered soul. He was a genius songwriter, arranger, and singer, known for his incredible duets with Roberta Flack, like Where Is the Love and The Closer I Get to You. His song, This Christmas, is still a holiday staple. But behind that beautiful voice, Donny was in a lot of pain. He had been diagnosed with serious mental health challenges, which made it hard for him to handle the pressures of fame. He would have periods where he was brilliant and others where he was deeply troubled. In January 1979, he was just 33 years old. He was in New York City and had just been in the studio with Roberta Flack. Things seemed to be going well, but later that night, he was found on the pavement outside the Essex House Hotel. The ruling was a self-inflicted passing, as he had fallen from his 15th floor hotel room window. What many people don't know is that his friends said he had been acting paranoid that day, claiming people were trying to get him. It was a heartbreaking end for a man who gave the world so much beautiful music. Donny's inner struggles were devastating, but our next story is about a brilliant singer whose light was dimmed not by a fall, but by a long and terrible illness. 7. Tammy Terrell. When you think of Marvin Gaye, you have to think of Tammy Terrell. She was his perfect duet partner. Together, they gave us timeless classics like Ain't No Mountain High Enough and You're All I Need to Get By. She had a bright, powerful voice and a star's presence. They were at the height of their fame in 1967. They were performing at a concert in Virginia when Tammy suddenly collapsed on stage into Marvin Gaye's arms. At first, they thought it was just exhaustion, but the truth was so much worse. Doctors discovered she had a malignant brain tumor. She was only 22 years old. What followed was a long and painful battle. She went through 8 different surgeries, but the illness kept coming back. The thing is, she was a fighter. She even kept recording from her wheelchair, with Marvin by her side, but after a nearly 3-year fight, Tammy Terrell passed away in 1970. She was just 24. Her passing deeply affected Marvin Gaye, who went into a long period of sadness and didn't perform for years. Losing a star at 24 is a tragedy. But our next artist was a teenage idol who passed away at 25 after a long fall from grace. 8. Frankie Lymon. Long before Michael Jackson or the New Edition, there was Frankie Lymon. In 1956, as the 13-year-old lead singer of the Teenagers, he became an overnight sensation with the massive hit, Why Do Fools Fall in Love? He was one of the very first black teenage pop stars. He had it all, but it all came way too fast. He had a fantastic voice and amazing dance moves, but he fell into a very dangerous lifestyle at a young age. He began struggling with a serious substance habit while he was still a teenager. His career faded as quickly as it started. He tried to make a comeback several times, but he couldn't beat his personal demons. In 1968, he was just 25 years old. He was planning another comeback and seemed to be doing better, but he was found in his grandmother's bathroom in Harlem, having passed away from an accidental overdose. The saddest part is that he was so young when he got famous, he never really had a chance to be a kid. His story became a warning for many young stars who came after him. Frankie's battle with addiction was a tragedy. Our next star, a modern-day hip-hop legend with deep R&B roots, also lost his life way too young, but not from substances, from a battle with his own body. 9. Big Pun. Big Pun, short for Big Punisher, was a lyrical genius. He was the first Latino rapper to have an album go platinum, and his 1998 debut, Capital Punishment, is considered a hip-hop classic. He had incredible rhymes, a lightning-fast flow, and a huge personality that made everyone love him. Part of his image was his size. He was a very large man, often weighing over 400 pounds. As his career took off, his weight became a serious health concern. His friends and family were worried about him, and he had even checked into a health center to try and get his weight under control. But here's the kicker. He had just left the health program early, against doctors' advice, and was staying at a hotel in New York with his family. In February 2000, he suffered a massive heart attack and a respiratory failure. He was only 28 years old. What many people don't know is that at the time of his passing, he reportedly weighed nearly 700 pounds. He was a huge talent in every sense of the word, and his passing was a major wake-up call about health in the hip-hop community. Big Pun's passing at 28 was a shock, but a new generation of artists who blended R&B and hip-hop would soon face their own tragic ends, starting with a star who was just 26. 10. Mac Miller. Mac Miller was an artist who truly grew up in front of his audience. He started as a fun-loving teen rapper and evolved into a deeply respected artist, producer, and singer who blended jazz, R&B, and hip-hop. His 2018 album Swimming was praised by critics as his most mature and beautiful work. But along with his artistic growth, Mac was always very open about his struggles with depression and substance abuse. He wrote about it in his music, and it was a constant battle for him. He seemed to be in a good place, as Swimming had just been released and he was preparing for a tour. The thing is, just 1 month after the album's release in September 2018, he was found unresponsive in his Los Angeles home. He had passed away from an accidental overdose. He was only 26. The truly devastating part is that the substances he took were later found to be counterfeit. They were laced with a much more powerful and lethal substance. His passing wasn't just a tragic accident. It was the result of a poisoned supply, a problem that would claim other artists. Mac's passing at 26 was a terrible shock, but just a year later, the music world would be rocked again by the loss of an even younger star who had predicted his own early passing. 11. Juice WRLD. Juice WRLD, whose real name was Jared Higgins, was a breakout star. His song Lucid Dreams was a massive global hit, and it perfectly captured a new sound of emotional R&B-infused rap. He was known for his incredible ability to freestyle, making up complex songs on the spot. He was on top of the world. But like Mac Miller, he was very open in his music about his personal struggles with anxiety and substance use. In December 2019, he was flying on a private jet from California to his hometown of Chicago. He was just turning 21. Here's where the story takes a dark turn. Law enforcement was waiting for the plane at the Chicago airport, suspecting there might be illegal items on board. Witnesses say that during the search, Juice WWRL began to have a seizure. He passed away at a nearby hospital. The cause was a massive accidental overdose. Many believe he consumed the substances quickly to hide them from the authorities. The most chilling part? In his song Legends, he rapped the line, "What's the 27 Club? We ain't making it past 21." Juice WRLD's passing at 21 was a self-fulfilling prophecy. But our next two stars were even younger, and they didn't pass from accidents, but from sudden, violent acts. 12. XXXTentacion, or X as his fans called him, was one of the most controversial and popular artists of his generation. His music was raw and emotional, mixing R&B, punk, and rap. He had a massive, dedicated following who connected with his themes of pain and depression. He also had a very troubled past and was facing serious legal issues. But in 2018, he was trying to turn his life around. He was focused on charity work and positivity. In June of that year, the 20-year-old was in Florida, shopping for a motorcycle. What happened next was fast and brutal. As he was leaving the dealership in his car, an SUV blocked him in. Two armed men got out and approached his vehicle. After a brief struggle, he was shot multiple times. The attackers took a bag from his car and fled. It was a robbery that turned into a fatal attack, all in broad daylight. The music world was stunned. He was an artist who divided people, but his passing at just 20 years old was an undeniable tragedy. X's life was taken in a violent robbery, but just 8 months later, another 20-year-old rising star who had a connection to X would meet a similarly tragic end. 13. Pop Smoke. Pop Smoke was the sound of New York. In 2019, his deep, gravelly voice and the unique Brooklyn drill sound made him an instant star. His song Dior was played everywhere, and he was working with all the biggest names in music. He was poised to be the next big superstar. In February 2020, he was 20 years old and staying in a rented house in the Hollywood Hills. He had been posting pictures on social media, showing off cash and designer goods. Here's the truly careless mistake that led to tragedy. In one of his posts, he accidentally showed a picture of a gift bag that had his full rental address printed on it. In the early hours of the morning, a group of intruders broke into the home. It was a home invasion. They confronted Pop Smoke, and during the struggle, he was fatally shot. The attackers fled. It was a senseless act of violence, all for jewelry, and it was sparked by a simple, accidental post on social media. Pop Smoke's passing was a shocking and preventable tragedy. Our next star was from a different era, a hip-hop legend known for his wild style, whose passing was just as chaotic as his life. 14. Old Dirty Bastard, ODB. There was, and only ever will be, one old dirty bastard. As a founding member of the legendary Wu-Tang Clan, ODB was the group's wild card. His R&B style singing and crazy rap flow made him a one-of-a-kind artist. He was known for his bizarre public antics, like famously interrupting the Grammy Awards. But his chaotic life was also full of legal troubles and a long public battle with substance abuse. He was in and out of jail and rehab facilities. In 2004, he seemed to be getting his life back on track. He was signed to a new record label and was working on a comeback album. What many overlooked is that just 2 days before his 36th birthday, ODB was at a recording studio in New York. He was complaining of chest pains, and then he collapsed. He never woke up. The cause was an accidental overdose. What many people don't know is that at the time of his passing, he had a lethal combination of different substances in his system. It was a sad end for an artist who was truly an original, a man whose body just couldn't keep up with his wild spirit. ODB's passing was a shock to the hip-hop world, but another famous rapper who was closely tied to Eminem would also meet a tragic end, not from substances, but from violence at a nightclub. 15. Proof, D12. If you were a fan of Eminem, you knew Proof. He was Eminem's best friend, his hype man, and a key member of the rap group D12. Proof was a highly respected Detroit rapper in his own right, known for his amazing battle rap skills. He was the glue that held their music scene together. In April 2006, Proof was 32 years old. He was out at a club called the CCC on 8 Mile Road in Detroit, a place that was famous in their songs. A game of pool was being played, and an argument broke out. Things escalated incredibly fast. The argument turned into a physical fight, and then firearms were drawn. The details are messy, but here's the bottom line. Proof was shot multiple times and passed away. To put it mildly, the whole situation was a senseless and tragic dispute. The wow factor is the terrible twist of fate. Proof was shot, and his life was taken by a bouncer who was the cousin of the man Proof himself had just shot during the argument. It was a terrible, tangled web of violence that took away a pillar of the Detroit hip-hop community. Proof's passing was a violent end at a club. Our next star was from a 90s R&B boy band, and his life also ended tragically, long after the spotlight had faded. 16. Tony Thompson, High Five. In the early 90s, the boy band High Five had huge R&B hits. Their song, I Like the Way, The Kissing Game, went to #1 on the charts. The lead singer, with his smooth and powerful voice, was Tony Thompson. He was a young star with a bright future. The group had a few more hits, but like many boy bands, their fame started to fade by the mid-90s. Tony tried to launch a solo career and worked on other projects, but he never reached that same level of fame. He began to struggle with personal issues behind the scenes. What many overlooked was that Tony had a serious problem with substance abuse. In June 2007, he was just 31 years old. He was found by police outside an apartment complex in his hometown of Waco, Texas. He had passed away from an accidental overdose. The truly sad part is that he was reportedly buying a cooling agent, possibly for an air conditioner. It was a hot day, and the lethal substances combined with the heat were too much for his body. It was a quiet, sad end for a man whose voice was once all over the radio. Tony Thompson's passing was a quiet tragedy, but our next star from a 90s girl group met her end in a sudden, shocking, and bizarre accident. 17. Natina Reed, Block. Natina Reed was the rapper and songwriter for the popular 90s girl group Block. They were protégés of Lisa Left Eye Lopes from TLC, and they had big hits like 808 and Bring It All to Me. Natina was the edgy, creative force in the group, and she even appeared in the hit movie Bring It On. After the group's success, Natina took a step back from the spotlight to focus on being a mother. She was engaged to the rapper Corrupt, and they had a son together. In 2020, she was 32 years old and reportedly working on a comeback. Here's where the story gets incredibly strange. In October 20, just 2 days before her 33rd birthday, she was walking on a highway in Atlanta at night. She was struck by a car. But the thing is, the driver who hit her was not found to be at fault, and no charges were filed. It was a total mystery. Why was she walking on a dark highway? Some reports say she was on her phone and just stepped into the road. It was a baffling and tragic end for a talented young woman. Natina's passing was a mystery, but our next two stories are about a family that was hit by tragedy not once but twice. Gerald Levert was R&B royalty. He was the son of O'Jays singer Eddie Levert, and he had a voice that was pure power and soul. He first hit it big with the group Levert, and then had a massive solo career with hits like Casanova, and Baby Hold On to Me. He was a giant of 90s R&B. He was known for his passionate performances and his big personality. He was always working, writing, and producing for other artists. In 2006, he was 40 years old and had just returned to his Cleveland home after a long trip. He was getting ready to go on tour. His cousin tried to wake him up, but he was unresponsive. Gerald had passed away in his sleep. The official report said it was from a powerful and accidental overdose of prescription and over-the-counter items. The thing is, Gerald was suffering from chronic pain due to a shoulder injury and was trying to recover from surgery. He simply took a lethal combination by mistake. His passing at just 40 years old left a huge hole in the R&B world. Gerald's accidental passing was a shock. But the Levert family's heartbreak was far from over, as another, younger member of the family would pass away just 2 years later under very different and very tragic circumstances. 19. Shawn Levert. Shawn Levert was the other key member of the 80s R&B group Levert, alongside his brother Gerald and their friend Mark. While Gerald was the lead singer, Shawn's smooth vocals and stage presence were essential to the group's success. He was part of an R&B dynasty. After his brother Gerald's passing in 2006, Shawn was devastated. He struggled to cope with the loss. He also had his own personal and financial problems. In March 2008, just a year and a half after Gerald's death, Shawn was 39 years old. He was arrested on warrants for failing to pay child support. He was taken to a Cleveland jail. But just 6 days into his sentence, he became sick. He was rushed to the hospital, where he passed away. The coroner's report said he had passed from complications of a lung disease, but his family was outraged. They believed he was denied his prescription medication while in jail. His wife even filed a lawsuit. It was a terrible and controversial end for a man who was still grieving the loss of his famous brother. The Levert family's double tragedy is heartbreaking, but our final story is about a beloved R&B diva who battled her own demons and whose passing also came far too soon. 20. Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman was elegance and soul personified. She was a stunningly beautiful woman, standing over 6 feet tall with a deep, haunting, and powerful voice. She was a star on Broadway and had a string of R&B hits like You Know How to Love Me and Don't Want to Change the World. She was a beloved diva, but behind her strong stage presence, she was fighting a deep, lifelong battle with mental health issues. She had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and struggled with depression and substance abuse for years. In June 1995, she was 45 years old and scheduled to perform at the famous Apollo Theater. But just hours before the show, she was found in her New York apartment. She had made a terrible, tragic choice, leaving behind a note. What many people don't know is that her final album, I Refuse to Be Lonely, was released just a few months later. It was a powerful and heartbreaking final statement from an artist who was in deep pain, but whose music continues to touch souls to this day.
1. Gregory Coleman. Many people are crazy about a specific 6-second drum solo from 1969. It comes from a song called Amen, Brother by a group called The Winstons. The man playing that incredible funky drum beat was Gregory Coleman. To put it mildly, that solo, known as the Amen Break, became one of the most important pieces of recorded sound in history. It was sampled and used to build the foundation of hip-hop and drum and bass music. You have heard it in thousands of songs, from N.W.A. to The Prodigy. So, the guy who created this legendary piece of music must have become a millionaire, right? The tragic truth is the exact opposite. What many overlooked is that Coleman never saw a single penny in royalties for his creation. The song was a B-side, and no one thought much of it at the time. He was just a session musician who was paid a small fee for his time in the studio. As his drum beat was making other people rich, Coleman's life went in another direction. He struggled to find steady work as a musician. Eventually, he found himself without a home, living on the streets of Atlanta, Georgia. The man whose rhythm became the backbone of entire genres of music died broke and homeless in 2006. A British DJ eventually raised over $30,000 for Coleman's estate, but it was far too late for the man himself. From a drummer everyone has heard but almost no one knows, we move to a man who was one of the most famous entertainers in the world. A true superstar who could do it all, yet still ended up owing millions to the tax man. 2. Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. was a force of nature. He was a singer, a dancer, an actor, and a comedian. As a key member of the legendary Rat Pack alongside Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, he was the definition of cool. He recorded R&B hits, starred in movies, and was a headliner in Las Vegas for decades. The man was a whirlwind of talent and charisma, and he made a tremendous amount of money during his long career. But the thing nobody tells you is that Sammy had a big problem with spending. He was known for his incredible generosity, often giving lavish gifts and huge amounts of cash to friends, family, and even strangers. He also spent a fortune on his own lifestyle. Unfortunately, he wasn't paying close enough attention to his taxes. For years, he simply didn't pay what he owed to the government. When he passed away in 1990, the world was shocked to learn the truth. Sammy Davis Jr. was in debt to the IRS for over $5 million. That would be more than $11 million today. The debt was so large that his wife had to auction off nearly all of his personal belongings and memorabilia to help pay it down. The man known as Mr. Show Business left behind almost nothing but a massive bill. Sammy's debts came from the taxman. But the next musician's problems came from something much more basic: the heartbreaking inability to see a doctor when he got sick because he simply could not afford it. 3. David Williams. You might not know the name David Williams, but you absolutely know his guitar playing. He was one of the most in-demand session guitarists in the business. His funky rhythmic style was a key ingredient on some of the biggest hits of all time. He played on Michael Jackson's albums Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad. He also backed up stars like Madonna, Stevie Nicks, and Aretha Franklin. He was the secret weapon behind countless R&B and soul classics. Session musicians like David are usually paid a flat fee for their work in the studio. They don't get the big royalty checks that the main artists do. While he made a decent living during his peak years, the money wasn't guaranteed to last forever. What many overlooked is that he, like many freelance musicians, did not have health insurance. In the mid-2000s, his health began to fail. He was suffering from high blood pressure, and in 2009, he had a major stroke. Without insurance, he couldn't afford the hospital treatments he desperately needed. His family and friends tried to raise money to help, but it wasn't enough. David Williams, the man whose guitar powered some of the world's greatest hits, passed away at the age of 58, a victim of a system that left him with no resources when he needed them most. Williams played for the biggest stars, but our next artist was one of the biggest stars in the world, a true prince of soul, whose life came to a heartbreaking end inside his own family home. 4. Marvin Gaye. When you think of classic R&B, the name Marvin Gaye is one of the first that comes to mind. He was the soulful voice behind Motown hits like I Heard It Through the Grapevine, What's Going On, and Let's Get It On. He was a musical genius, a handsome and charismatic performer who could write songs that made you dance and songs that made you think. He was, without a doubt, one of the most important artists of his generation. But behind that smooth voice was a man in deep turmoil. The thing nobody tells you is that Marvin Gaye spent years struggling with his own personal demons. He battled with serious substance abuse issues that cost him a fortune. He also went through 2 very expensive divorces that drained his finances. To make matters worse, he was in a constant battle with the IRS over unpaid taxes. By the early 1982s, his financial situation was a complete disaster. He declared bankruptcy and, to escape his debts, he moved to Europe for a few years. Even after a successful comeback with the hit song Sexual Healing, he was still broke. When he passed away tragically in 1984, his estate was found to be insolvent. This means he had more debts than assets. The Prince of Motown had no will, no life insurance, and no savings, leaving behind a legacy of brilliant music but a financial catastrophe. Marvin's troubles tore his family apart, but for the next legendary voice, her troubles followed her to the very end, leaving her with a shocking debt that was bigger than most people's lifetime earnings. 5. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston was known simply as The Voice, and for good reason. Her powerful, soaring vocals were a gift to the world, making her one of the best-selling artists of all time. Hits like I Will Always Love You and I Wanna Dance with Somebody turned her into a global icon. She sold over 200 million records worldwide, starred in hit movies like The Bodyguard, and earned a fortune that most people can only dream of. You see, for all her incredible success, Whitney was fighting a long and difficult battle with substance abuse. This struggle had a devastating impact not only on her amazing voice, but also on her finances. Her unhealthy habits were incredibly expensive to maintain. On top of that, as her reliability wavered, she started to lose out on high-paying gigs and endorsements. She was still spending money like a superstar, but the superstar income was no longer flowing in. When she tragically passed away in 2012, the world was stunned to learn the state of her finances. Reports claimed that Whitney Houston was not just broke. She was in massive debt. Some sources estimated that she owed as much as $20 million to her record label and other creditors. The woman who had once signed a $100 million contract had an estate that was worth less than her enormous debts. Whitney's voice was a global treasure, but our next singer's voice was one of the first to truly define the sounds of jazz and blues, yet she passed away with less money in her bank account than a single movie ticket costs today. 6. Billie Holiday. Lady Day, as she was known, was a true musical pioneer. Billie Holiday's voice was one of a kind. It was full of emotion, pain, and a deep, soulful beauty. She didn't have the powerful range of other singers, but she had a way of phrasing a lyric that was pure genius. Songs like Strange Fruit and God Bless the Child were not just hits, they were powerful social statements. She changed the art of singing forever, but her life was one of constant struggle. The thing nobody tells you is that from a young age, she faced incredible hardship. As an adult, she fell into a pattern of substance abuse that would follow her for the rest of her life. She also got into terrible, abusive relationships with men who took advantage of her and stole her money. To make matters worse, she was relentlessly targeted by government authorities for her personal habits. She earned a lot of money in her career, but it was quickly taken by managers, agents, and her own expensive lifestyle. When she was on her deathbed in a New York hospital in 1959, she was under arrest, with police guarding her room. After she passed away, the world learned the heartbreaking truth. Billie Holiday had just 70 cents in her bank account. All she had to her name was $750 in cash that was found strapped to her leg. Billie Holiday was a victim of her time, but our next artist became the biggest star on the entire planet, a true king of his genre, yet he was hiding a secret debt so massive it was almost beyond belief. 7. Michael Jackson. He was the king of pop, an artist whose R&B roots helped him become the most famous person on earth. Michael Jackson's album Thriller is the best-selling album of all time. His music, his dancing, and his electrifying stage presence changed pop culture forever. He earned hundreds of millions, possibly even billions, of dollars over his career. He owned a massive ranch called Neverland, filled with amusement park rides and a zoo. He seemed to have limitless wealth. But what many overlooked was his spending. To put it mildly, his lifestyle was extravagant. He spent fortunes on art, antiques, and charity. But there was another, darker side to his expenses. In his later years, Michael faced very serious and very public legal battles. These court cases cost him tens of millions of dollars in legal fees and settlements. At the same time, his income was not what it used to be. The massive stadium tours and record-breaking album sales were behind him. He was borrowing huge sums of money just to maintain his lifestyle and pay his bills. When he passed away in 2009, just before a planned comeback tour, it was revealed that Michael Jackson was in debt to the tune of around $500 million. His estate was initially insolvent, and it took years of careful management and new deals to finally get it back into the black. Michael's spending was the stuff of legend, but the next Queen of Soul's downfall came from a very different kind of struggle, one that left her depending on public assistance during her final days. 8. Etta James. Etta James was the definition of a powerhouse vocalist. Her voice was raw, gritty, and full of soul. She could belt out a rock and roll tune 1 minute and then break your heart with a bluesy ballad the next. Her signature song, At Last, has become one of the most iconic love songs ever recorded. She was a true legend, a Grammy winner, and a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But her life off stage was marked by chaos and struggle. For decades, Etta James fought a fierce battle with substance dependency. This fight not only took a toll on her health, but also on her finances. What many people don't know is that the money she made from her music often went straight to supporting her habits. She also had a reputation for being a difficult artist to work with, which sometimes cost her lucrative opportunities. In her later years, she faced serious health problems that required expensive, round-the-clock medical care. She had not saved enough money to cover these costs. The situation became so dire that the woman with the multi-million-dollar voice had to rely on Medicaid, a government program for those with low income, to pay for her care. When she died in 2012, her sons were fighting in court over control of her very small estate. Etta James had to rely on government help, but our next artist was the daughter of royalty, yet she too found herself in a desperate financial situation after fighting her own personal demons. 9. Natalie Cole. Natalie Cole was born into music royalty. Her father was the legendary Nat King Cole, one of the smoothest and most beloved singers of all time. But Natalie was a star in her own right. She burst onto the R&B scene in the 1,970 seconds, with hits like This Will Be an Everlasting Love and Our Love. She had a powerful voice and a commanding stage presence, winning multiple Grammy Awards. The thing nobody tells you is that with fame came immense pressure, and Natalie soon found herself in the grips of a severe addiction. Her personal struggles became very public and nearly destroyed her career and her life. During this dark period, she burned through the fortune she had earned. She later wrote in her autobiography that she spent huge amounts of money to support her habit, leaving her nearly penniless. She managed to make one of the most incredible comebacks in music history with her 1,991 album, Unforgettable, with Love, where she famously sang a duet with her late father's recorded voice. The album was a massive success and made her wealthy once again. However, the years of substance abuse had taken a toll on her health, and she faced expensive medical issues later in life, including a kidney transplant. While she was not destitute when she passed in 2015, the cost of her recovery from addiction and her later health battles had a significant impact on the fortune she had worked so hard to rebuild. Natalie Cole fought hard to regain her life and career, but our next artist, a trailblazing singer and actress, found her career sabotaged and her finances ruined by the very people who were supposed to help her. 10. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge was a true trailblazer. She was a stunningly beautiful and incredibly talented singer and actress. She started her career singing in clubs with an R&B and jazz style, but she is best remembered for her acting. In 1954, she became the first African-American woman to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress for her role in the movie Carmen Jones. She was a glamorous star who seemed destined for greatness. But in the Hollywood of the 1950 seconds, a black leading lady faced enormous obstacles. What many overlooked is that she was denied many roles because of her race. Her career began to stall. At the same time, her personal life was falling apart. She was the victim of terrible financial advice and abuse. Her managers and advisors mishandled her money, investing it in bad deals that lost her entire fortune. She was forced to declare bankruptcy and lost her beautiful Hollywood home. She tried to make a comeback, but the momentum was gone. In 1965, her life came to a tragic end. She passed away from what was ruled an accidental overdose of medication she was taking for a foot injury. When she died, Dorothy Dandridge, the woman who had once been on the cover of magazines and nominated for an Oscar, was completely broke. Dorothy's story is one of stolen potential, while our next artist was a beloved balladeer whose smooth voice hid his own private health and financial struggles that only came to light near the end. 11. Luther Vandross. When it came to romantic R&B ballads, Luther Vandross was the undisputed king. His voice was like velvet, smooth, rich, and full of emotion. For more than 2 decades, he created an incredible string of hits, including Here and Now, Power of Love, Divided by Love Power, and his famous cover of A House Is Not a Home. He sold over 40 million records and was a constant presence on the radio. He was the voice of love for a whole generation. Luther was a very private person. He rarely discussed his personal life or his health, but behind the scenes, he was dealing with serious health issues. He struggled with his weight for most of his life and had both diabetes and hypertension. These conditions are very expensive to manage over many years. In 2003, he suffered a major stroke that left him in a wheelchair and unable to sing again. The medical costs associated with his care for the last 2 years of his life were enormous. The thing nobody tells you is that while he was still a wealthy man by any normal standard, these hidden health costs and a very generous lifestyle meant that his estate was not as large as people expected. When he passed away in 2005, he left behind a modest estate, much of which was likely used to settle any remaining debts from his extensive medical care. Luther's health issues created hidden debts, but for our next artist, the Ivory Queen of Soul, her debts were much more public, stemming from battles with the very industry that made her a star. 12. Tina Marie. Tina Marie was a one-of-a-kind talent, a white singer who was so soulful that she was signed to the legendary Motown Records. She became known as the Ivory Queen of Soul. She was taken under the wing of funk legend Rick James, and together they created classic R&B hits. On her own, she scored major successes with songs like Lover Girl and Ooh La La La. She was a gifted singer, songwriter, and producer. But Tina was also a fighter. Early in her career, she got into a major legal battle with Motown. She wanted to leave the label, but they refused to release her or release her new music. The case went to court and resulted in a landmark ruling, often called the Tina Marie Law, which made it illegal for a record company to keep an artist under contract without putting out their albums. She won the legal fight. But what many overlooked is that these kinds of battles are incredibly expensive. This, combined with later career ups and downs and the costs of managing her health, left her in a difficult financial position. When she passed away suddenly in 2010, it was reported that she had unresolved debts. The woman who fought for artists' rights found herself another victim of the tough financial realities of the music business. Tina Marie fought the system, but our next artist, the son of another R&B legend, found his finances strained by legal issues of a more personal and familial nature. 13. Gerald Levert. Gerald Levert had R&B music in his blood. He was the son of Eddie Levert, the lead singer of the legendary group the O'Jays. Gerald first found fame as the lead singer of the group Levert, which had hits like Pop, 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 Goes My Mind. He then launched a very successful solo career becoming known for his powerful, passionate voice on songs like Baby Hold On to Me and Private Line. He was a talented songwriter and producer, working with many other artists. He made a lot of money and was known for his generous spirit, often helping out friends and family. But that generosity sometimes led to problems. You see, his life was complicated by a series of lawsuits and personal disputes that were a constant drain on his finances. There were paternity suits and other legal entanglements that cost him a great deal of money in legal fees and settlements. These private battles, combined with a lifestyle that included supporting a large extended family, put a major strain on his resources. When he passed away in 2006 from an accidental overdose of prescribed and over-the-counter medications, he was still a major star, but his estate was reportedly facing significant financial strains that surprised many of his fans. Gerald Levert's life was cut short by a tragic accident. But our next artist made a heartbreaking choice after years of battling depression and the financial droughts that came with a stalled career. 14. Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman was a truly breathtaking performer. She was tall, elegant, and possessed a deep, powerful voice that could handle jazz, soul, and R&B with ease. She was a commanding presence on stage and in the studio. She is best known for hits like You Know How to Love Me and her stunning performance on the song Betcha by Golly Wow with Norman Connors. She was a critical darling and a beloved figure in the soul music community. But the thing nobody tells you is that for much of her life, Phyllis Hyman suffered from severe depression and bipolar disorder. This made the ups and downs of the music industry incredibly difficult for her to handle. When her career hit slow periods and the hit records weren't coming, it had a major impact on her mental health and her finances. She struggled to find consistent work that paid what she was worth. The financial pressure added to her emotional turmoil. She felt undervalued by the music industry and was frustrated by her lack of mainstream success. In 1995, after years of these private battles, she made a tragic and desperate final act. She ended her own life just hours before she was scheduled to perform at the Apollo Theater. In a note she left behind, she wrote, "I'm tired, I'm tired." Her passing revealed a story of an artist who was broken by a business that couldn't see her true value. Phyllis Hyman's story is one of deep emotional and financial pain. Our next artist was also a musical genius, whose mental health struggles contributed to his early and tragic end. 15. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway was a musical genius. There is no other way to put it. His voice was pure, soulful, and incredibly expressive. He was a brilliant songwriter, a masterful keyboard player, and a gifted arranger. He gave the world timeless songs like A Song for You and The Ghetto. His duets with Roberta Flack, like Where Is the Love and The Closer I Get to You, are some of the greatest of all time. But what many overlooked was that Donny was fighting a serious battle with his mental health. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, a condition that caused him to have severe bouts of depression and delusions. This made it very difficult for him to handle the pressures of fame and to work consistently. He had to be hospitalized several times. His treatments were expensive, and his inability to tour or record regularly meant his income was unpredictable. His finances suffered greatly as a result. In 1979, at the age of just 33, his life came to a shocking end. He was found on the ground below the 15th floor window of his New York hotel room. While his career was on an upswing at the time, his personal life was still in turmoil, and he left behind debts related to the high cost of his mental health care. Donny Hathaway's struggles were with his own mind, but our next singer faced a different kind of health battle. One that drained all her resources despite having one of the most famous songs of the 1,970 seconds. 16. Minnie Riperton. Minnie Riperton had a voice that was truly an instrument. She was famous for her incredible 5-octave vocal range, which allowed her to hit stunningly high notes in what is known as the whistle register. Her 1,000 975 hit song Lovin' You is a perfect showcase of this amazing talent. The song was a #1 hit all over the world and made her an international star. But just 1 year later, in 1976, she received a devastating diagnosis. She had breast cancer. At the time, the prognosis for this disease was not as hopeful as it is today. You see, Minnie was a fighter. She became one of the first celebrities to speak openly about her diagnosis, becoming a spokesperson for the American Cancer Society. She continued to record and tour, even while undergoing difficult and expensive treatments. In the 1,970 seconds, health insurance was not always great, and the costs of fighting a major illness like cancer could quickly wipe out a person's savings. When she passed away in 1979, at the young age of 31, she had used up most of her fortune paying for her medical care. She left behind a legacy of beautiful music, but very little money. Minnie Riperton's fortune was lost to a health crisis. Our next artist, one half of a legendary Motown duo, also had her life and finances cut short by a tragic illness. 17. Tammy Terrell. Tammy Terrell was a rising star at Motown Records in the 1,960 seconds. She was beautiful, vibrant, and had a voice that was sweet yet strong. She was a successful solo artist, but she became a true legend when she was paired with Marvin Gaye. Together, they recorded some of the most beloved duets in music history, including Ain't No Mountain High Enough and You're All I Need to Get By. They had incredible chemistry and were poised for even greater success, but their partnership was cut short by tragedy. In 1967, while performing on stage with Gaye, Tammy collapsed into his arms. Doctors discovered that she had a malignant brain tumor. For the next 3 years, she bravely endured multiple surgeries and treatments as she fought for her life. What many people don't know is that these medical procedures were incredibly expensive, and they completely drained her finances. Her illness left her unable to perform or record, so there was no money coming in. Motown reportedly helped with some of the bills, but it wasn't enough. When she passed away in 1970, at just 24 years old, Tammy Terrell had no estate to speak of. Her bright future was stolen by illness, which also took every dollar she had ever earned. Tammy Terrell was a teen star whose life ended too soon. Our next artist was also a teenage sensation, the original boy band leader, whose life took a dark turn that left him penniless. 18. Frankie Lyman. Long before the Jackson 5 or New Edition, there was Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers. In 1956, a 13-year-old Frankie Lyman became an overnight sensation with the smash hit Why Do Fools Fall in Love? His high, innocent voice and charming stage presence made him one of the first black teen idols. The group was a huge success, but it didn't last long. Frankie soon left the group for a solo career that never took off, but his biggest problem was a personal one. The thing nobody tells you is that at a very young age, he got involved with dangerous substances. By his late teens, he had a serious dependency problem that would control the rest of his short life. Any money he made was quickly spent. He tried to make several comebacks, but his personal issues always got in the way. He lost his home and was in and out of trouble. In 1968, at the age of 25, he was found in his grandmother's bathroom. His life tragically cut short by his long-standing addiction. The boy who had once been on top of the music world died with absolutely nothing. Frankie Lyman's solo career failed to launch, a fate that also befell our next artist, whose famous falsetto voice couldn't save him from obscurity after he left his legendary group. 19. Philippe Wynne. If you've ever listened to the classic 70-second soul group The Spinners, you have heard the magical falsetto voice of Philippe Wynne. You can spell his name Phil Up Wynne. He was the lead singer on some of their biggest hits, like Could It Be I'm Falling in Love and The Rubber Band Man. His incredible vocal improvisations at the end of their songs, known as the Philippe, were his signature move. He was a dynamic and unforgettable frontman. In 1977, Wynn decided to leave the Spinners at the height of their fame to start a solo career. He believed he was destined for even bigger things on his own. Unfortunately, it was a huge miscalculation. His solo albums failed to sell, and he quickly faded from the public eye. What many overlooked is that without the fame of the Spinners, he struggled to find work. He ended up playing small clubs for very little money. The man who had once sung in front of thousands was now performing for just a handful of people. In 1984, while performing at a nightclub in Oakland, California, he suffered a massive heart attack on stage and passed away. The great voice of the Spinners died, broke, and in relative obscurity. 1. Frank Ocean. Imagine being one of the biggest new stars in music. For a long time, his personal life was kept very private. What many overlooked is that his songs often spoke about love in a way that felt very personal, almost like he was speaking to a specific person, but no one knew who. Then, in 2012, something truly brave happened. Just before his first major album came out, Frank Ocean shared a message online. It wasn't about music or awards, it was about love. He wrote about his first true love and how that love was for a man. This was a huge deal. It was like a spotlight shining on a secret part of him that he had finally decided to share with the world. He didn't have to do it, but he did, opening a door for so many others. This moment was a massive wow factor because it was so unexpected from such a rising star. Many expected him to stay quiet, but he chose truth. It showed that even in the modern music world, coming out can be a big step. His honesty changed the game for many, showing that an R&B star could be open about their affections and still be loved for their music. What other R&B heartthrob faced whispers and career trouble after a very public but vague incident? 2. Tevin Campbell. Remember Tevin Campbell? He had such a powerful voice, hitting those high notes with ease. In the 90 seconds, he was a huge deal, singing songs that made you feel good and dance. He sang about love, and fans adored him. But then, things got a little unclear. You see, rumors started to spread about him. In 1999, Tevin had a run-in with the law. The details were a bit fuzzy, but it involved him asking a male police officer for something improper. To put it mildly, this event sent shockwaves through his career. Afterward, his bright star began to dim. He never fully confirmed or denied what happened, or what it meant for his private life. What many overlooked is how quickly public opinion can turn, especially when a star's personal life doesn't fit the expected mold. His story is a wow factor because it shows the tough choices people faced. Here was a young, talented star, and a single event seemed to change his path forever, leaving fans and the public to wonder about the hidden parts of his life. It makes you think about the pressure stars face. But what about a queen of music, who despite constant chatter, never gave a straight answer about her true loves? 3. Queen Latifah. Queen Latifah is a true legend. She's not just a singer, but an actress, a rapper, and a role model for many. From her early days, she brought a strength and a fierce independence to everything she did. She sang, she acted, she made us laugh and think. But not all things are what they seem. Throughout her long and amazing career, there have always been whispers, constant chatter about her love life, especially about her being interested in women. You see, Queen Latifah has always been very private about her personal relationships. While many famous people shout their love from the rooftops, she kept hers very close. What many overlooked is that even without saying anything, her strength and presence spoke volumes to many in the LGBTQ+ community. She was often linked in rumors to her personal trainer, but she never confirmed anything. This quiet strength is a wow factor. She navigated a public career for decades, facing endless questions, and held her ground. It shows her powerful control over her own story. choosing to share only what she wanted to. It's a testament to her strength. But how about an R&B artist who actually used being called bisexual to help her career, even if it limited her reach? 4. Michelle Ndegeocello. Michelle Ndegeocello is a truly unique artist. Her music blends R&B with funk, jazz, and rock, creating a sound that's all her own. She's known for her deep, thoughtful lyrics and amazing bass playing. Early in her career, something interesting happened. She was labeled as bisexual, and what many overlooked is that she didn't shy away from this label. In fact, to put it mildly, she used it. You see, for some artists, being seen as different can be a way to stand out. It created a buzz around her. She was open about her relationships with both men and women, which was rare for an R&B star at the time. This was a wow factor because she turned a personal detail into part of her artistic image. However, the thing nobody tells you is that while this openness helped her get attention, it might have also stopped her from becoming a huge, mainstream pop star. Some record labels and radio stations back then were not ready for an artist who was so open about loving different genders. It's a powerful lesson about how acceptance in music has changed over time. What about a smooth singer whose love songs were for women, but behind the scenes, there were whispers of a very different story? 5. Freddie Jackson. Freddie Jackson was the king of romantic ballads in the 80 seconds. His voice was so smooth, so comforting, singing about sweet love and gentle moments. His songs were always aimed at women, making them swoon. He seemed to fit the classic image of a ladies' man, a true R&B charmer. But not all things are what they seem. Behind the scenes, there were constant rumors about Freddie's private life. Whispers followed him everywhere, especially about him being interested in men. To put it mildly, these rumors were tough on him. The thing nobody tells you is that this was a time when such talk could truly damage a star's career. There were even sad and untrue guesses about his health, connecting to the AIDS crisis, which was a very difficult time. Freddie always avoided giving direct answers to these questions, keeping his personal life very guarded. This secrecy is a wow factor, because it shows the intense pressure and fear artists faced about their true identities being revealed. He kept singing those beautiful love songs, even while carrying the weight of speculation. But our next star, a true legend, was so deeply closeted that even his friends only spoke about his struggles after he passed away. 6. Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross. Just hearing his name brings to mind a voice like velvet, a singer whose talent was beyond compare. He gave us some of the most beautiful love songs ever recorded. His performances were legendary, full of emotion and grace. You see, he was the voice of romance for millions, but not all things are what they seem. What many overlooked is the deep sadness that came with his private life. Luther was deeply closeted. He never publicly spoke about being gay. His friends, long after he passed away in 2005, would share stories about his struggles. They spoke of how difficult it was for him to hide such a big part of himself, how it weighed on him. The thing nobody tells you is that for someone so famous, the idea of being open about his true affections felt impossible in his time. This is a huge wow factor. Here was a man who gave so much love through his music, yet couldn't openly share his own. It highlights the immense societal pressure that forced stars to hide their authentic selves, even at a great personal cost. His story makes us wonder about the many other artists who carried similar heavy secrets. Speaking of secrets, what about a disco legend who started in the shadows before bursting out in full color? 7. Sylvester. Sylvester was a force of nature. In the 1,970 seconds, when disco ruled the dance floors, his powerful, soaring voice was everywhere. Songs like "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real" became anthems. He was flamboyant, joyful, and truly unique. But not all things are what they seem. Before he became the Sylvester everyone knew, he lived a double life. You see, in the early 70 seconds, it was very different. People didn't talk openly about being gay. Sylvester, for a time, kept his true identity a secret. He performed in different ways, exploring his identity quietly. What many overlooked is that his journey from hiding to fully embracing who he was, including his gay identity, was a brave and steady climb. By the time his disco hits came out, he was ready to shine as his true self. His journey is a powerful wow factor. He moved from a time of hiding to becoming an open and proud icon, inspiring countless others. He showed that you could be truly authentic and still be a massive star. It makes you think about the beginnings of artists and how much bravery it takes to be oneself. But our next star goes back even further. A mother of blues who had secret loves almost a century ago. 8. Ma Rainey. Let's travel way back to the 1920 seconds, a time of flapper dresses, jazz, and the birth of R&B through the blues. Ma Rainey was a giant. She was known as the mother of blues for a good reason. Her powerful voice, her stage presence, and her honest songs laid the groundwork for so much music that came after. She was a pioneering black woman in music, breaking down barriers. But not all things are what they seem. The thing nobody tells you is that Ma Rainey had a secret. While she sang about classic love stories, her own romantic life was far from traditional. She had affairs with women, living a life that was very much her own. What many overlooked is that in the 1920 seconds, such relationships were kept very, very quiet. To put it mildly, it was not something openly discussed or accepted. This is a fascinating wow factor. Here was a woman of immense talent and influence, a foundational figure in R&B, who was quietly living her authentic truth almost 100 years ago. It reminds us that hidden histories of love and identity are woven throughout time, not just in modern days. Who else from a legendary group had bandmates spilling secrets after their passing? 9. David Ruffin. When you think of the Temptations, you think of smooth moves, sharp suits, and incredible harmonies. David Ruffin was one of their most iconic lead singers, with that raw, powerful voice that made songs like My Girl unforgettable. He was a true showman, a star in every sense of the word. You see, he was the face and voice of so many beloved hits. But not all things are what they seem. Long after his passing, whispers about David Ruffin's private life started to come out. His bandmates, those who knew him best, shared stories and hints about his secret relationships, suggesting he was interested in men. What many overlooked is that even within a tight-knit group, some things are kept very quiet for a long time. The thing nobody tells you is that during the height of the Temptations' fame, any public hint of being gay would have caused a massive uproar. This is a wow factor because it changes how we see a legendary figure. It adds another layer to his story. It shows the incredible pressure on stars to maintain a certain image, even if it meant hiding who they truly were. Speaking of the Temptations, another lead singer from the group also faced similar quiet rumors. 10. Eddie Kendricks. Eddie Kendricks, with his high, sweet falsetto voice, was another key part of the Temptations' magic. He sang lead on classics like Just My Imagination and had a very distinct, almost flamboyant style. He loved fashion, loved to shine, and stood out from the crowd. You see, he had a unique spark that drew people in. But not all things are what they seem. Just like David Ruffin, whispers followed Eddie Kendricks about his private life. Rumors suggested that he, too, might have been closeted, hiding his true affections. What many overlooked is that his bold style, while outwardly expressive, could also have been a way to express himself without directly revealing his relationships. The thing nobody tells you is that back then, artists often had to walk a very careful line. This is a wow factor because it makes you re-examine the public image of a star. Was his flamboyant style just a part of his stage presence? Or was it also a quiet way to show a part of his true self that couldn't be spoken aloud? It adds depth to the understanding of how artists navigated their identities in a less accepting world. But what about another groundbreaking artist named Sylvester, whose early life was filled with drag and gay experiences before his big break? 11. Jobriath Boone. Jobriath Boone was set to be a massive star in the 1970 seconds. He was a glam rock singer with a theatrical style and a voice that had R&B influences. He was hyped up as the first openly gay rock star, a huge deal at a time when nobody was really doing that. His record company spent a massive $500,000 on his launch, which back then was an unbelievable amount, almost $3 million today. You see, everyone thought he was going to be the next big thing. But not all things are what they seem. The thing nobody tells you is that while his team used his identity to get attention, the music world wasn't truly ready for it. He was closeted in his early hype, but then he came out fully. What many overlooked is that the public, and even the music industry, reacted very differently than expected. Instead of embracing him, many people shied away. This is a heartbreaking wow factor. Here was an artist pushed to be open, only to find himself largely ignored once he actually was. His career quickly faded, and he became largely obscure. It's a sad reminder that being first can sometimes come with a very high price, showing just how much the world needed to change before true acceptance could take hold. What about an experimental R&B singer who kept her trans identity private for years before sharing her truth? 12. Anoni. Anoni, also known as Anthony Hegarty, is an artist with a truly haunting and beautiful voice. Her music is a unique blend of R&B. For years, she was known simply as Anthony, and her work was praised for its raw emotion and deep meaning. You see, her music was always about truth and feelings. But not all things are what they seem. What many overlooked is that during her earlier career, Anoni kept her trans identity private. She was expressing herself through her music, but her personal journey with her gender identity was something she kept very close to herself. The thing nobody tells you is that for many artists, there's a delicate balance between sharing their art and revealing their deepest personal truths. In the 2000s, Anoni began to openly share her identity as a trans woman, adopting her chosen name. This was a wow factor because it showed a different kind of reveal, not about who she loved, but about who she was. It was a powerful step, aligning her outer self with the profound depth of her music. Her story highlights that identity is complex and deeply personal, and the journey to share it is unique for everyone. Who was a true R&B heartthrob whose accident brought out whispers of his hidden relationships? 13. Teddy Pendergrass. Teddy Pendergrass had one of the most powerful, seductive voices in R&B history. He was known for his Ladies' Night concerts and his amazing talent for making women swoon with his smooth delivery. He was the ultimate romantic lead, a powerhouse singer who commanded the stage. You see, he defined a whole era of love songs. But not all things are what they seem. Before his tragic 1982 car accident that left him paralyzed, there were already quiet whispers about Teddy's private life. Rumors suggested he might have been gay or bisexual, with talk of secret relationships with men. What many overlooked is that his public image as a ladies' man was carefully crafted, and any deviation from it would have been highly risky for his career. The thing nobody tells you is how much pressure was on him to be a certain kind of star. His story is a wow factor because it adds a layer of quiet speculation to a true legend. It makes you wonder how much personal truth was hidden behind the amazing voice and powerful stage presence. It shows that even the most celebrated stars carried personal burdens unseen by their fans. What about a pop icon who was forced to be open about his sexuality after a very public, embarrassing incident? 14. George Michael. George Michael was a superstar. From his days with Wham to his incredible solo career, his voice and his songs were everywhere. He wrote some of the most enduring pop and R&B-infused hits. Songs that spoke of love, desire, and freedom. You see, he was a massive global icon. But not all things are what they seem. For years, George Michael kept his bisexuality a secret from the public. He was in relationships with women, and his public image was carefully managed. What many overlooked is the immense personal struggle this created for him, even as he reached incredible fame. The thing nobody tells you is that the burden of keeping such a secret can be incredibly heavy, even for the most successful people. Then, in 1998, a very public arrest for an indecent act in a public bathroom forced his hand. To put it mildly, he had no choice but to come out. This was a huge wow factor and a turning point. After years of hiding, he spoke openly about being gay. While the circumstances were difficult, his honesty was celebrated by many, and he became an important voice for the LGBTQ+ community. His journey shows how even difficult moments can lead to powerful revelations and a path to true authenticity. Speaking of rock and R&B influences, what about a heavy metal legend who came out after decades of silence? 15. Rob Halford. Now, you might be thinking, heavy metal? What does that have to do with R&B? But what many overlooked is that many metal singers, including the great Rob Halford from Judas Priest, have amazing vocal range and soulful power that owes a lot to R&B music. Rob Halford is known as the metal god, and for very good reason. He is a true icon with an incredible multi-octave voice that defined a generation and an entire genre of music. With Judas Priest, he pioneered the iconic leather and studs look that became the uniform for metalheads everywhere and crafted a sound built on blistering twin guitar attacks. They were the architects of modern metal, creating timeless anthems of rebellion and power, like Breaking the Law and Living After Midnight. You see, he was the voice of a whole genre, a symbol of defiance and strength. But not all things are what they seem. For decades, as Rob Halford roared on stage and sang about powerful themes of freedom and fighting the system, his personal life was kept completely private, locked away from the world. He was a gay man, but he kept it hidden for almost 30 years, from the band's formation in the early 70 seconds all the way through their peak of global fame. The thing nobody tells you is how deeply isolating and dangerous it was for someone in such a tough, hyper-masculine genre like heavy metal to be open about their sexuality back then. The 1,980 seconds metal scene was built on an image of aggressive masculinity. The fear of being rejected by fans, dropped by the record label, or even facing violence was not just a possibility. It was a constant, terrifying reality. Imagine the immense pressure of being a global icon for millions of young men, all while hiding the very essence of who you are, terrified that one wrong move could bring your entire world crashing down. Then, in a landmark moment in 1998, Rob Halford bravely came out during an interview with MTV. He wasn't promoting an album or trying to create a spectacle. He just stated it as a fact of his life. This was a massive wow factor, not just for metal, but for music in general. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community. Here was a true legend, one of the founding fathers of the genre, stepping forward and living his truth after so long. His honesty was a watershed moment. It didn't destroy his career. Instead, it solidified his legendary status. The metal community, feared to be his harshest critics, largely embraced him with open arms. His honesty proved that you could be tough, powerful, and authentic in any genre, inspiring countless fans and showing that even the metal god had an R&B heart that beat for love and the courage to finally show it to the world. Who else waited until much later in life to share his private world? 16. Barry Manilow. Barry Manilow is the king of classic pop ballads, a master songwriter with a voice that melts hearts and songs that have filled arenas for half a century. Hits like Mandy, Copacabana, and the soaring anthem I Write the Songs are timeless classics, embedded in the very fabric of popular music. He's been a superstar for decades, a household name loved by millions of fans around the world who saw him as the ultimate romantic showman. His entire public persona was built on creating these grand, sweeping love songs, often directed at a female muse. You see, his music is all about grand romance, and for his fans, he was the embodiment of that romance. But not all things are what they seem. For over 40 years, an incredible 4 decades at the height of his fame, Barry Manilow kept a huge part of his life a closely guarded secret. He was in a loving, committed relationship with his manager, Gary Keefe, the man who had been by his side since 1978. What many overlooked is the immense emotional and logistical effort it took to keep such a long-standing partnership completely private from the world, especially when your entire brand is built on love songs. Every interview, every public appearance, every lyric was a calculated performance to maintain a facade. The thing nobody tells you is that for stars of his generation, the fear of disappointing their fan base was crippling. For Manilow, whose core audience was largely composed of women who swooned over his romantic persona, the risk felt monumental. He believed that revealing his true love story would not just change his public image, but betray the fantasy he had sold to millions of devoted fans for his entire career. Then, in 2017, at the age of 73, Barry Manilow bravely came out and publicly shared his beautiful love story with the world in an interview with People magazine. He finally confirmed his marriage to Gary and spoke about his fears and his relief. This was a beautiful wow factor. The reaction was not what he had feared for all those years. Instead of rejection, he was met with an overwhelming wave of love and support. His fans were simply happy that he was happy. After a lifetime of making music about love for everyone else, he finally got to share his own personal love story with the world. His journey showed that it's never too late to be honest about who you are and who you love, and that true acceptance can come at any age. His story is a powerful testament to enduring love and the quiet courage it takes to protect it. What about another foundational R&B figure who kept his true experiences under wraps in the 1,950 seconds? 17. Little Richard. Little Richard was a whirlwind, an explosion of sound, color, and pure, unadulterated energy. He was a true pioneer, a founding father of rock and roll who took the potent sounds of R&B, gospel, and boogie-woogie and set them on fire. With earth-shattering hits like Tutti Frutti and Good Golly, Miss Molly, his wild percussive piano playing, his powerful gospel-infused shouts, and his uniquely flamboyant style made him a legend. He was more than a musician. He was a force of nature who smashed cultural barriers with every electrifying performance. You see, he tore down walls in music and culture in a way no one had ever seen before. But not all things are what they seem. In the deeply conservative and segregated R&B scene of the 1,950 seconds, Little Richard was already pushing boundaries with his pompadour hairstyle, makeup, and wild stage antics that felt like they were from another planet. But what many overlooked is that behind the scenes, he was also navigating his gay and queer experiences, which he kept largely closeted out of necessity. The thing nobody tells you is that the world was infinitely less ready for an openly gay black man in entertainment back then than it is today. To put it mildly, it was almost unheard of and incredibly dangerous. He existed at the intersection of racism and homophobia in the American South, two crushing forces that could have easily destroyed his career and his life. He was a trailblazer on multiple fronts, and that path was lonely and fraught with peril. He also struggled his entire life with his deep Christian faith, which caused him immense internal conflict over his sexuality, leading him to publicly renounce rock and roll multiple times. This internal and external battle is a profound wow factor. The man who helped invent rock and roll, who was so outwardly expressive and seemingly free, was forced to keep a huge part of his personal identity hidden away. Even from himself at times, he used his flamboyant persona as both a form of expression and a shield. He was so over the top that many people simply couldn't process the reality of his identity, allowing him to hide in plain sight. It shows the incredible strength and complexity it took for him to be so groundbreaking on stage while keeping such a deep secret off stage. He paved the way for androgynous icons like David Bowie and Prince, who had far more freedom because of the doors he kicked down. His story reminds us of the immense personal sacrifices made by our greatest pioneers. Who was a house and R&B music pioneer who lived discreetly until a major health crisis pushed him to advocacy. 18. Frankie Knuckles. Frankie Knuckles is a legend, plain and simple. He's rightfully known as the godfather of house music, a revolutionary genre that blended the soulful feel of R&B, the pulsating energy of disco, and the futuristic sounds of electronic synthesizers to create something entirely new and exciting. At clubs like the Warehouse in Chicago, he wasn't just a DJ. He was a musical shaman, creating a spiritual experience on the dance floor. His influence on dance music, and by extension R&B, is massive and undeniable. He built sonic cathedrals where people, especially those from marginalized communities, could find sanctuary and truly be themselves. You see, he shaped the sound of a generation and gave them a place to belong. But not all things are what they seem. For much of his early and most influential career, Frankie Knuckles lived discreetly as a gay man. While his music was the soundtrack for a vibrant, inclusive, and largely queer subculture, his personal life was kept intensely private. What many overlooked is that while the dance music scene he helped create was a haven of acceptance, the wider world certainly was not. Being a prominent public figure still carried significant risks, and for many in his position, privacy was not just a preference, it was a necessary shield. The thing nobody tells you is that for many artists and community leaders of that era, privacy was a way to protect not only themselves and their loved ones, but also the sacred spaces they had created. Any controversy could bring unwanted attention and prejudice, threatening the very existence of the community they served. Then, in the 1,980 seconds, the devastating AIDS crisis hit, tearing through the heart of the very community that house music celebrated. This terrible, tragic time pushed many, including the intensely private Frankie Knuckles, to become more open and to advocate for their community. This was a wow factor, born from tragedy, because a widespread health crisis became the catalyst for a new form of public advocacy and, in a way, a form of coming out. His sexuality was an open secret within his scene, but he stepped onto a larger stage to use his platform and his experiences to fight for awareness and raise funds for research. He became a board member of the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. His story is a powerful example of how personal experience and community tragedy can fuel broader change, transforming a private artist into a public advocate out of love and necessity. What about a modern bounce and R&B artist who kept her queer identity low-key before becoming an open icon.